All right. Well, we don't have class today, obviously, because our class is at 9:30. So, thank you everyone for being safe and staying home. And we're going to think about how to post on that discussion board. So, the question on the table right now is, how do these two writers that are doing the same kind of research, how do they differ? So, when we think about what it means to be an educated person, what is the difference between rows and graph? And so, in order to kind of form your own opinion, right, we talked about this. This is not just your opinion, it's an informational and analytical response. So, first, you have to give the information, and that is the literal. Right, so the actual quotation that you're going to use from the essay. So you want to think about, what am I going to say about Rose? And which section of Rose's argument is interesting to me? So in order to get to Rose's argument, we go through this whole personal story that he tells, right? And then we get to this idea of like the questioning assumptions about workers and class. So it's interesting to think of it this way, because I think sometimes we are more comfortable understanding that certain races do certain jobs, but it's actually a class distinction. So what does that mean? Like, what is the working class? What is the middle class? So here we have him talking about the actual facts. So after he tells that whole story, he goes to this section where he says, numbers are rife in most workplaces, right? And he's talking about gauges. And then he gets down to the end of that, and he's talking about this cabinet maker. And then after that, there's this quote that says, workers themselves often make sketches on the job. I frequently observed them grab a pencil to sketch something on a scrap of paper or a piece of the material they were installing. So that is note-taking, right? So imagine that, right? Here you are, you're this low-class worker, right? You're in one of the lower classes, so not upper class, not upper echelons. And you're taking notes. And so Rose is talking about these examples, right? These note-taking things. Then he says in the next section, because workplace language is used in the flow of other activities, we can overlook the remarkable coordination of words, numbers, and drawings required to initiate and direct action. So what Rose is saying is that low-wage workers take notes, right? They're not illiterate. They're not dumb. And so when we really get to this, at the end of that essay, he really makes his point, right? He says this whole thing about social separation. So in that last section, if we believe everyday work to be mindless, then it will affect the work we create in the future. When we devalue the full range of everyday cognition, that means thinking, we offer limited educational opportunities and fail to make fresh and meaningful instructional connections among disparate kinds of work and knowledge. If we think that whole categories of people identified by class or occupation are not that bright, then we reinforce social separations and cripple our ability to talk across cultural activities and divides. At the very end, he gets to the point of his essay, right? Affirmation of diverse intelligence is not a retreat to a soft-hearted definition of the mind. To acknowledge a broader range of intellectual capacity is to take seriously the concept of cognitive variability. To appreciate all the Rosies and Joes, the thought that drives their accomplishments and defines who they are. This is a model of the mind that is worthy of a democratic society. So he's talking about the United States. We live in a democratic society. He's talking about the value of people, and he's talking about people we know, low-wage workers, right? People that we are, low-wage workers. And so that's Rose. So then we go to Graph. Now, Graph's writing for Pedagogy, which is a teaching manual, right? It's sort of like a magazine that focuses, or like you can imagine a website that only talks about teaching. And imagine this article was published on this website, but it's from a journal, and the journal is called Pedagogy. And so when you're citing the writers, if you're going to talk about Rose, you want to cite the Rose article, which appeared in another journal called the American Scholar. And if you're going to talk about Graph, you want to talk about how in the article Hidden Intellectualism in the journal Pedagogy, Gerald Graph states the following. So what you have to demonstrate is how you set up the quotes and that you can cite them. So what I'm asking you to do is to really talk about the difference between them. Okay,